3 days ago, Ashley Flynn was murdered in her Tipp City home. Tonight, police announced that they have made an arrest in connection to her death.
Police said this evening that Ashley's husband, 39-year-old Caleb Flynn, is in jail and charged in connection with her murder.
At 12:42 in the morning, a text message was sent from a pastor's phone. It said, "It's almost done." Less than 2 hours later, his wife was dead, shot inside her own home. Their two little girls were right there in the house. And when the 911 call came in, it was reported as a burglary. But there was no burglar. There never was. This is the story of Ashley Flynn. And let me tell you something.
February 16th, 2026. Tipp City, Ohio. A small, peaceful town where neighbors know each other by name. Streets lined with houses where families sleep soundly through the night. It's the kind of place where you feel safe, where you don't lock your doors twice, where nothing bad is supposed to happen. But on that cold Monday morning, just after 2:30 in the morning, something terrible happened on Cunningham Court. A 911 call broke through the silence. A man's voice, frantic and desperate, told the dispatcher that someone had broken into his home, that an intruder had come in through the night, and that his wife had been shot. Emergency services rushed to the scene. Officers arrived expecting a burglary. What they found instead was something that would shake that entire community to its core. Inside the bedroom of that house lay Ashley Flynn, 37 years old, a mother, a wife, a teacher, a coach, a woman who had spent her life pouring herself into the people around her. She had been shot, and she was gone. The man who made that 911 call was her husband, Caleb Flynn. He told officers that a stranger had broken in while they slept, that he had no idea who would do this, that it was random, violent, senseless. A burglary gone wrong, he said. A horrifying accident of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. That was the story on the morning of February 16th. But stories sometimes are not what they seem. In the days that followed, investigators would begin to pull at the threads of that story. And what they found beneath it would shock not just Tipp City, but people across the entire country who came to know the name Ashley Flynn. Before we go further, it's important that we pause and truly understand who Ashley was. Because in cases like this, it is so easy for the victim to become a name, a headline, a detail in someone else's story. But Ashley Flynn was not a detail. She was a person. She had a laugh and a purpose and people who loved her deeply. She had daughters who called her mom. She had students who looked up to her. She had a life that mattered. And she deserved so much better than what happened to her on that cold February night. So before we talk about evidence, before we talk about what the cameras captured, before we talk about what the investigators found, let's talk about her. Let's talk about Ashley. Because if we're going to tell this story, we're going to tell it right. And it starts with a woman who was, by every account, one of the good ones. If you had met Ashley Flynn on any ordinary day, maybe at a volleyball practice, maybe in a school hallway, maybe at church on a Sunday, you would have walked away thinking, that's a good person. She was 37 years old, a mother of 2 young daughters. She lived in Tipp City, Ohio, with her husband Caleb and their girls, and by all appearances, she was doing the work that quiet, meaningful lives are made of. She coached volleyball at Tippecanoe Middle School. Think about that for a moment. She didn't just show up and run drills. She showed up for young girls who were figuring out who they were. She was the kind of coach who teaches more than a sport. She was teaching them how to work hard, how to be a team, how to keep going when things get difficult. She also worked as a substitute teacher in the Tipp City school system. That means she walked into classrooms that weren't always easy. Rooms full of restless kids who might not even know her name yet. And she still showed up. She still cared. The people who worked alongside her described her as warm and engaged. Friendly in a real way, not a surface way. She wasn't the kind of person who smiled just for show. She genuinely connected with the people around her. At home, her world revolved around her 2 daughters. On the night that her life was taken, her girls were asleep in that very house. They were safe, physically at least, but they woke up to a world without their mother in it. And that is a weight no child should ever have to carry. Ashley and Caleb were also part of their local church community. Faith was woven into the fabric of their family life. Caleb served as a worship pastor and musician, a visible, respected role in their congregation. To the outside world, they were a family grounded in faith. Committed, stable, good. But here's the painful truth that this story keeps returning to. We rarely know what happens behind closed doors. We see the public version of a family, the smiling photos, the Sunday mornings, the community involvement. We see what people choose to show us. And sometimes, the private reality is something entirely different. Ashley's friends, her colleagues, her students' parents, they are left now trying to reconcile the Ashley they knew with the horror of how her life ended. Trying to hold on to the memory of a woman who gave so much of herself to others. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a mother, a teacher. She was someone who chose every single day to show up for other people. And on the morning of February 16th, 2026, she never got to make that choice again. She deserves to be remembered, not just as a victim, but as a woman who lived and who mattered. Caleb Flynn was not an unknown face in Tipp City. Long before February 2026, people knew his name. In 2013, he appeared as a contestant on Season 12 of American Idol. He stood on that stage, in front of millions of viewers, and talked about his life, about his faith, about his wife. In the years that followed, he built on that visibility. He became a worship pastor, a church musician, a community figure, a man who stood at the front of the room on Sunday mornings and led people in song. In many ways, he represented something people deeply want to believe in, the idea that a person can be exactly who they appear to be. So, when his name appeared in connection with Ashley's death, the reaction was immediate and visceral. Disbelief, confusion. People in that community could not square what they were hearing with the man they thought they knew. But let's go back to that night. Shortly after 2:30 in the morning, Caleb called 911.
He was frantic.
He told the dispatcher that someone had broken in, that a door to the garage was open, that Ashley had been shot. Officers responded expecting a home invasion. When they arrived, Caleb was there.
Visibly distressed. Crying.
Hyperventilating. Saying things like, "Is she gone?" and "Ashley's dead." He called his mother while officers were still on scene. At one point, he was physically sick. It looked, on the surface, like a man completely falling apart with grief. But investigators are trained to look past surfaces. And what they found at that house did not match the story Caleb had told. There were no signs of forced entry. No broken windows. No kicked-in doors. Nothing that clearly said a stranger came through here. What there was a garage door open and a refrigerator positioned in a way that partially blocked a side entrance. Odd details that raised questions instead of answering them. Ashley had been shot in the head. Multiple times. Spent shell casings were on the bedroom floor beside her. She had been killed in her own bed. In her own home. While her daughters slept nearby. The physical evidence wasn't telling the story of a random burglary. It was telling a different story entirely. And then there was the body cam footage. When authorities reviewed the recordings from officers on scene, they watched Caleb closely. His words, his movements, his reactions, the way he interacted with police. And something about it, something in the texture of that grief, began to feel inconsistent with what he was claiming had happened. 3 days later, on February 19th, 2026, Caleb Flynn was arrested. He was charged with murder, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence, meaning investigators believe someone had deliberately altered that crime scene to mislead them. Bail was set at $2 million. The quiet street on Cunningham Court would never be the same. When you hear the word investigation, it might call to mind something fast and dramatic, a detective piecing together clues in a single night, a clear answer emerging by morning. Real investigations are rarely like that. They are slow, they are careful, and they depend on every single detail. In the days following Ashley's death, law enforcement didn't work alone. The Tipp City Police Department was joined by the Miami County Prosecutor's Office. The FBI was also reported to be involved, assisting with forensic analysis. The kind of detailed scientific work that takes time but tells the truth more reliably than almost anything else. Forensic teams went through that house carefully. They collected the shell casings. They documented the ballistic evidence. They examined every point of entry and exit in that home, looking for what was there and, importantly, what wasn't. What wasn't there was any real sign that a stranger had broken in. No forced entry. No evidence of an intruder moving through the house. The story of a burglar who slipped in through the night, shot Ashley, and disappeared. That story had no physical foundation to stand on. And there was more. The position of Ashley's body. The location of the shell casings. The details of how and where she was shot. These were all being analyzed carefully, as were the timeline of events and Caleb's own account of what he said he heard, saw, and did that night. The autopsy was conducted, though some of the full forensic results were still pending at the time of reporting. Those results, ballistics, timing, cause of death, would all be central to building the legal case. Meanwhile, there were the charges themselves. Murder. That speaks for itself. Felonious assault, a charge that pointed toward the nature of the attack on Ashley. And tampering with evidence. That third charge is a quiet but powerful one. It suggests that the scene wasn't just the site of a crime. It suggests that someone tried to make it look like something it wasn't. That someone moved things, staged things, arranged things in that house to tell a story that would point investigators away from the truth. If that is proven, it changes everything about how we understand that night. At his arraignment, Caleb Flynn pleaded not guilty. His defense attorney called for careful examination of all the evidence and stressed the importance of due process. That is the right of every accused person under the law, and it is a right we should all take seriously. But the legal process was moving forward. A preliminary hearing was set. The court date of March 26, 2026 was scheduled. And the weight of what had happened, the loss of Ashley, the shock of the arrest, the grief of a community, that weight was not getting lighter. It was only just beginning to settle. There is a particular kind of pain that comes when something like this happens in a small town. Tipp City, Ohio is not a big city where people are anonymous. It's a place where you recognize faces at the grocery store, where your kids go to school with your neighbor's kids, where you sit next to the same people in church every week and think you know them, really know them. And then something like this happens and you realize, do we ever truly know anyone? The community's reaction was one of deep, genuine shock. Neighbors on Cunningham Court, parents of Ashley's volleyball players, fellow teachers in the Tipp City school system, church members who had sat beneath Caleb's worship leading and felt moved by it. All of them suddenly having to hold two things at once, the image of the man they knew and the weight of what he was now accused of. The church where Caleb had served in pastoral and worship roles was also affected. Reports indicated leadership changes and resignations in the aftermath. Institutions that had trusted him were left to reckon with what that trust had meant and what it had cost. Online, the conversations spread quickly. Reddit threads, social media posts, speculation about motive, about marital problems, about things happening behind closed doors that no one outside the family could truly know. None of those theories were confirmed by law enforcement. And we should be careful. In moments like this, it is easy to fill silence with stories. But speculation is not truth, and we owe it to Ashley's memory to hold that line. What we do know is this: a woman is gone. 2 little girls lost their mother. A community lost someone who showed up for them every day, in school hallways and on volleyball courts and in quiet, ordinary moments of community life. And the questions that remain, the motive, the full forensic picture, what exactly happened in that house in the early hours of February 16th, those questions are still working their way through the legal system. The trial process is ahead. Evidence will be presented. Arguments will be made. And somewhere in all of that, the truth about what happened to Ashley Flynn will be laid out in a courtroom. But we don't have to wait for a verdict to feel the weight of this. We don't have to wait to mourn a woman who deserved to grow old, to watch her daughters graduate, to coach one more season, to teach one more class, to live the rest of the life she had built. This case, like so many cases we follow, has a way of pulling us in through the drama of the investigation, the body cam footage, the charges. But at the center of all of it is something very simple and very painful. A woman named Ashley Flynn existed. She was good to people. She worked hard. She loved her daughters. She was part of a community that is now grieving her absence. And she deserved better. That's where we end. Not with unanswered questions, not with speculation, but with her name. Said clearly. Said with the respect she is owed. Ashley Flynn. Remember her. Thanks for watching. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from.